Hi everyone, today's video is my long overdue build video for the Diecast Mafia's Orktober challenge. So the reason this video is out so late is because it took me forever to edit down all of the footage I shot, so it just took a lot longer than usual to edit. Anyways, as you can see on the turntable, we have this 1/26 scale Saico Morris Minor van, which is missing a few pieces because I bought this as a job lot of 3 that were all missing different pieces, which I have plans to use for some future customs. For this build I'm going to be taking some inspiration from one of my old favourite video games called Pursuit Force, which was on the PSP. In this game you play as a police officer trying to take down multiple crime factions. One of the most fun mechanics is you could leap from your vehicle and jump onto one of the enemy vehicles and have the most insane gunfight. One of the many factions in this game was called the Cons, who were escaped convicts who built their vehicles out of whatever they could steal. Hence they have a very ramshackle style similar to the Orks, which I thought would be perfect for this challenge. The particular vehicle of theirs I'm taking inspiration from is called the Bulldog, which is this old 50s style pickup truck with an AA gun on the back. So into the build I start by completely disassembling the diecast. And then take my jeweler saw and figure out where I'm going to cut the roof off, as well as the doors. And with the doors and roof gone, it's starting to look a lot more like the car from the video game. Next I remove the false floor in the back, which was covering the pullback motor. With the floor now glued into place, I can remove the posts on the side quarter panels and glue them into place too. Following this, I rip the seats from the interior piece so that I can mount them lower to allow more room for the minifigs to fit inside. I used some C-shaped styrene to replace the transmission tool, which was removed with the rest of the floor. Initially I glued the seats in, but after a quick test fit I realised the figures still sit a little too high, so I take my sprue cutters and just trim the seats down a bit more. And as you can see, the figures now sit level with the windshield. Now it's time for me to add the gun in the back. For this I decided to cannibalise one of my old builds, which was one of my earliest builds, built using a Revell Rams and a Kobe Flak 38. Here's a quick look at what the original car looked like, as well as the original Kobe gun. Now I always felt the Kobe gun looked a little too small for this build, but at the time I was just using whatever I had my hands on to build this. Here's a quick look at the truck without the gun on the back, which doesn't look too bad as it is, but who knows, this might give me the idea of coming back and touching this truck up, since I've learned a lot of new skills since I built this, and it'd be the perfect excuse to come back and do a few different things. So I start by completely dismantling the frame that this gun is mounted to. I do a quick test fit and find the gun sits a little too low and catches every time I try and rotate it, so I need to correct that. But first I noticed this gap in the gun armor's manlet, which in real life would be for a horizontal periscope for the gunner to use to aim this flat cannon. But with this being an Ork build, it won't have anything fancy like a fancy scope like that. So for this I'm going to move the seat to the other side and then just put it in a mechanical sight. So I stripped the gun down using my hobby knife to break the bricks apart. This ends up being a little bit more difficult than I thought it would, so I resort to just using my dual saw to cut away the pieces I don't need. So I start removing the studs to hide the fact that this was a Kobe set, or a Lego-like set. So after a bit of tinkering off camera and then adding some Lego bricks just to anger the purists, I've got the gun built up to where I like it, and I can do a complete 360 without catching on anything. Off camera I fill in the brick cavities with some green stuff. This is again help hide the fact that this is just a toy that's being made of Lego bricks, or the Kobe bricks should I say. I also add some starring to the bed to fill the hole where the pullback motor used to be. I do the same for the interior pieces, for the gaps that were there for the hinges on the doors. Next I sketch out an ammo can for the gun. Which I then cut and assemble using some masking tape to keep it all together and glue it from the inside. Following this I begin to work on the gun sight using some styrene tube to make the sight ring and some flat styrene strips to make the mount for the sight. As well as the reticule on the inside of the ring. Next I test fit the ammo can and then cut a little notch in it so that when I put an ammo bolt in it looks like it's feeding into the gun. I then do my usual trick of cutting and bending a piece of zip tie to make the ammo bolt. To make the gun look a bit more orkish, I cut a piece of styrene tube to go over the top of the original barrel. This is to make it look like a bigger caliber of weapon. I also cut a smaller piece of tube to go on the front to make the gun's muzzle. I then use my sprue cutters to hack up the end to make this look like a very used gun that's been poorly maintained in typical Ork fashion. I also add some botch repair panels to the barrel as well. Next I grab my Mega Constructs figure and start planning out the gun controls using some flat styrene strip. And with the framework in place, I add a piece of L-shaped styrene and a piece of styrene rod to add a simple joystick kind of control. While doing another test fit with the figure to make sure there's no clearance issues, I noticed the sight isn't within eye level of the figure, so I rebuilt the sight again for an angled version, which lines up the figure's eye line a lot better. Now onto the wheels, which I plan to use these leftover Ork wheels from some of my previous Ork builds. First I roughly cut a piece of styrene rod about the width of the base of the diecast. And then mark out how far onto the axle the wheels fit. So I can trim down the axle tube, which will be cut the same length as the axle. Now the original plan was to glue these tubes onto the base of the diecast, but the wheels are a bit too big and they don't fit in the wheel wells. So I need to add some spacers to give the wheels clearance. But before I can mount those, I need to remove the detail moulded into the base. So I hack off the moulded on detail of these leaf springs using my hobby knife. And add the square styrene tube. Next I cut and add some more styrene tube to thread the axles through. Then with some flat styrene strips, I make some leaf springs to go over the top of these. Followed by adding the axle tubes and some shock absorbers that I pre-built. To make the shock absorbers, I took some styrene rod and some styrene tube, cut them to length and then glued them together. For some more detail underneath, I decided to build some drive shafts using some styrene rod. Before adding these, I cut some styrene tube to mount to the axles as differentials. I simply split these down the middle and then slot them over the original axle tubes, mounting them so the cut fits the base of the diecast so you'll never see it. then add the drive shafts, which I've added some styrene tube to for some extra detail. Now usually these two axles will go into a transfer case, which I don't have the time to model, so instead I'm going to take some C-shaped styrene and mount it over the top like it's some kind of protective, like it's a skid plate to protect it from whenever it's driving over rocky terrain. After going through my bits box, I found this toy truck, which has some really cool choice parts that I want for this build. And this is a snap and play dinos versus trucks. I do wish I'd picked up a bunch of these when I first bought this, because I think I only paid a couple of quid for it, but I've got a pretty bad eye for bits that are useful in kitbashing. Either I buy stuff and never use it, or don't buy it and then wish I'd bought it later. So like I said, I cut the bumper off this and mounted it onto the Ork Trukk that I'm building. Then reinforce it with some C-shaped styrene. And then make a new grill using some L-shaped styrene. So since the original headlights on this diecast are long gone, I used some Zane Industries 10mm bulk headlights for one side, and two 7.5mm oval bulk headlights on the other side, just to give it that mismatched Ork look. And then add this piece from the toy truck to the front as a battling ram. I also add the exhausts. Going back to the Ork wheels, I decided to add the hubcaps from the toy truck as well, just to make the wheels look a little different from the original Ork wheels. Now it's time to add some Ork makeshift repair panels. To make these I used my hobby knife to hack away at the edges. Now I must warn you, I cut myself multiple times doing this, and I think next time I'm just going to use a file and file the panels down. It would have taken longer, but I wouldn't have cut myself as many times as I ended up doing. So yeah, I think next time I'll use a file. It takes a little longer to do it this way, but it seems less risky. Now for the engine, I plan to use this Lego piece, because again, let's anger all the Lego purists. But first, I want to sand down the detail on the hood because it's not quite flat, and I did plan to drill into the hood, but it was just going to take forever to do and I was running out of time, and so this just seemed a quicker and easier option. So I filed that down with a file so it was all nice and flat. Glue the engine on. And then use some styrene to make an outer edge so it looks like the engine is actually sticking out of the hood. To give the gun some more decor, I decided to add this Brickham's M249 machine gun for the passenger to use. I start by adding some square styrene tube for the weapon mount. I then thread some thin styrene rod through the bipod mount. Which I then slot through a piece of styrene tube, completing the mount for the gun. And then trim this down and combine it with the first part of the weapon mount, which I've also added a few little additional details on. To make the gun a bit more orkish, I decided to trim down the barrel and add a new muzzle similar to the one as the main gun. I then make a new shroud using some square styrene tube and add some venting with a drawing pin. Which I then cut down and glue on top of the gun. I also realised the stock was going to get in the way a lot when I go home to animating the figures using this. Next it was time to work on the windshield. For this I plan to use these 3D printed cages that I've been saving up. Every time I'd buy some 1/72 scale World War II drivers, they would come in this little 3D print cage, and so I just kept putting them to the side thinking they'd become useful for some mesh at some point, and here we are. So I trimmed them down and then applied them to the windshield, although they weren't quite big enough to cover the entire windshield, so I used two different pieces, because again, the Orks would have just found whatever they could have used and glued it on. I also added some brackets using some L-shaped styrene. Next I wanted to add this roll bar, which I got from a Foxbox Ork Trukk bed that I bought ages ago and never used. But clearly it's a little too big, so I trim it down. And then use some styrene tube for mounting brackets inside the bed. So here's the truck before paint. Now I've done a few little details here and there. Sorry I didn't do a rivet montage in this. I did actually plan to do a full stop motion rivet montage and use my camera and everything, but I didn't use my light setup, so I just had some horrible light flicker, so I scrapped the whole thing. Anyhow, let's get some paint on this now. I start with a base coat of Revell Matte Black, just because I figured painting it black would look better for the flames that I'm going to do later. Followed by some Revell Aquacolor Tank Grey for the odd panels. For the underside and bare metal parts, I use Revell Aquacolor Rust, which I then go over the top of with some Revell Aquacolor Steel or Aluminium. For the interior, I use some Revell Aquacolor Wine Red. Then I attempt to paint the flames with some Revell Aquacolor Matte White, which I then go over the top of with some Revell Aquacolor Lufthansa Yellow, and then followed by doing some edge highlights with some Aquacolor Fiery Red. And finally, I break out the matte white again and paint in some checker patterns. And here's the final build. Like usual, I painted all the other little details off camera just to kind of cut down the painting process. I did go back and repaint the checker pattern onto the larger panels, and I'm reasonably happy with how this turned out, though I do see a few things I would like to touch up, mostly the paint. As I've been recently experimenting with acrylic markers, I'd like to get some really thinner tip ones and possibly touch up where the flames are and the checker pattern, and maybe actually paint some proper Ork graffiti on this thing, but that's something I'll do probably at a later date. I do really enjoy kitbashing these Ork vehicles because they allow you to just go and do whatever you want, and it doesn't matter how bad or good it turns out, because in the Ork style it just works. Since the rear gun was mounted on a Lego piece, it is removable, and I've made a little panel that goes over the top to make it look like a fuel cell instead. In keeping with that, since the front gun isn't permanently attached either, that can come out, and I could possibly replace it with a different weapon or a flagpole, although I haven't really come up with any options yet. Anyhow, if you've enjoyed this video, please check out the other builds by the other builders by searching Diecast Mafia Orktober Challenge. Remember, this is a completely free to join monthly challenge hosted by BJ Customs and Mad Eye Miniatures. So feel free if you're a builder to take part. There's no restrictions other than whatever the theme is. And as usual, I hope you stick around for the glamour shots and the short animation I've made. And I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.